knows, you know? So anyway, we want you to do that multiple times during the day. So during the break, find someone, have that conversation, pretend there's someone you know who's interested in results in some way you found that out, and then just have a conversation with them. And the key is to not pressure them, not to sell them, but to see where they are, meet them where they are. And that's the most important thing, just have a real human conversation. A lot of times people just say, I'm too busy. And I go, yeah, I understand that. You know, but I still take comfort from being with other people who look at things the way I do, even if I can't spend a lot of time at it. Hear, hear. So,
I have to say,
yes.
Years ago, I wrote a letter telling you about results. I asked him for help to start a written forward. And he wrote back, and he says, I'm too busy.
I was a minister of this church at the time. Eloise keeps reminding me of this. Look where I am now. So sometimes it just takes time, right? All right. Well, next we have Jared Williams and Kristen Claudy as our connection to him. Kristen, would you come up and introduce Jared? And Jared, would you come up too, please?
I didn't really prepare to do this, Craig. Hi, I'm Kristen Claudy. This is my friend Jared Williams, and he is recently stepped down as a city council person in Fort Worth. We wish he was still there, but he's continuing to do amazing work. He works at the Tarrant County Food Bank as the Vice President of Government and External Relations. And how long have you been doing that, Jared? 4 or 5 years. Okay, very good. He's also in seminary, and has a heart for what we're doing here at Results. And there's so much more we could say, but would you come on up here, Jared? And let's give him a round of applause.
So I hope those cheers were cheers of a celebration for my next chapter, not cheers of relief. Indeed, it's an honor to share this space with you. Hopefully, if I close this laptop, it doesn't turn the screen off. Okay, good. But indeed, it's a pleasure to be able to share some time with y'all. Thank y'all for being here on an early Saturday morning. If any of y'all are like me and have 2 babies under 2, any morning is a disaster to wake up to. But I count it and still count it as joy to wake up to 2 amazing young babies and an amazing partner. And I'm just so grateful to spend this Saturday morning with y'all. Before I just start yakking away and starting a conversation, I just want to first of all commend you, Craig, and the entire Results team. I really want to honor the incredible movement that y'all are creating. Obviously, y'all are a community of passionate and committed and just loving people who believe that poverty doesn't have to be the norm, and that we can end poverty for every neighbor that we encounter alongside of them, and that we can create a system by where anyone who experiences poverty has a community ready and willing to lift them, whether it's through policy, whether it's through social action, whether it's through charity, whether it's through community good. And maybe one day we'll all flourish from birth on, right? And so y'all have a bold vision. I share that vision. I too have lived experience in poverty and know the power of the village. And so I'm just incredibly grateful for y'all. I'm also really grateful that y'all dare to embark upon advocacy, even at the federal level. DC sometimes is, I can't think of a word to say in this sacred space. But yeah, okay, good. I'm the son of my dad is my pastor and my roommate, so we say a lot of words at home and in church. So. But nonetheless, the courage that y'all shared to speak and to speak prophetically in the halls of power, to dare to be innovative and creative and to reimagine what life in this nation can be. We did an organizing event this Wednesday, and I said, what will it profit this nation if we gain the whole world but we lose our very soul? And you were the hands and feet of that type of work, that you were not willing to compromise gain for the souls of folks experiencing poverty, and poverty is not their identity, and you know that, and so you are walking alongside people in the halls of Congress that tell people who may be out of touch or may be disillusioned or just flat out don't care, that they should care about their neighbor. So I am off my soapbox giving you many accolades, but if I can impress anything upon you, keep up the good work and know that there are many people like me who too want to see the same change that you're creating. So the exercise y'all did on relational organizing, that is real life, that's powerful, and I hope that we continue to work together. Craig, thank you for inviting me in the space. I'd just love to share a little bit about food insecurity as I've seen it in the world, and just to share a little bit about what we're doing at Ternary Food Bank and at Feeding Texas and Feeding America alongside you all to address every cause of hunger, including poverty. And just before I begin, I'd love to share my story. I grew up in Southwest Fort Worth, son of two educators. My mom was a third grade teacher. She is no longer with us physically. She passed of breast cancer and is now living in victory. And my dad is a high school teacher. He retired, but then he went back. Most educators do that, I've learned. And he's now a teacher here in Tarrant County at a juvenile justice center. That's his new ministry field, encouraging kids who have, experienced very tough situations. And so both my parents were organizers and cared a whole bunch about community, and so I couldn't get away from community work if I tried. And I found my way to the food bank after having lived experience, especially my formative years growing up with my parents, to food insecurity. My favorite struggle meal was fried bologna and maple syrup. Not because that was what I desired, but that was what was in the refrigerator and the pantry, and the only thing that was there. And so that's where I get my sweet and savory fancy these days. I have lived experience with hunger, and when the opportunity came after many years of community organizing and serving in public service as a city council member and working for many nonprofit organizations and causes, I found myself being invited to serve on the board of Ternary Food Bank, and they didn't have a government relations team, they didn't have an advocacy team, and they really wanted to get more involved in the systemic transformation of policy change and anti-hunger policy change. And so the CEO, our CEO, President CEO, Julie Butner, asked me if I would help create this kind of organic space of community organizing, advocacy, and government relations. And I said yes, and so I stepped down from the board, and that's how I entered into this role. And so as a part of our work as an organization, we have decided strategically to put grants, marketing and communications, and our government relations teams all in the same department. And the reason being is because our stories have power and need to be elevated, right? Our lived experiences around poverty and around hunger need to be elevated, and thus we have a marketing communications team focused on elevating stories around hunger. Resources are needed to end many of the struggles and challenges that our communities experience. And so our grants team is constantly working to match resources to the stories that we're most often hearing around experiences of hunger and food insecurity. And then lastly, government relations. We recognize that power exists in all different types of ways and spaces. We as people have people power. Our lawmakers have the power of a vote. Our folks with financial resources have the power of like money and investing in these type of movements. And so needless to say, our grants team works hand in glove with all of those teams. And really our mission is to alleviate hunger and improve health. We believe that it's not just okay to pass out any old type of food, right? Like we want to make sure that we're providing nutritious and healthy food that not only nourishes the body, but also nourishes their health. And ultimately, just like many of you, we envision a community where everyone has access to the food they need. And so when we say end hunger, we mean it twofold: ending hunger for the neighbor that's experiencing it today, and then ending hunger in the sense of creating a system of resources that when anyone experiences hunger, that they don't have to live without food security. Right, and that's really the goal, is that we're trying to create an infrastructure in every zip code across this nation to ensure that folks have access to high quality food and that they can access that food with dignity. And we were founded, as many food banks were, in the 1980s. Actually, the first food bank was founded in Arizona at St. Mary's Cathedral, and the movement built all across the country, and food banks were popping up. And over time, we, as a collective of food banks, organized together and established what's called the Feeding America Network. And this Feeding America Network is a network of 200 food banks all across the nation, and every food bank has an assigned service area so that every zip code is served by a food bank. Now, food banks operate really as a distribution and logistics operation. The food bank's role is really to source and rescue lots of food from all kinds of sources, not just government commodities. Yes, we do access that, but from farmers and producers and manufacturers and grocery retailers and food industry. And predominantly our food is donated and rescued. As of post-COVID, food banks have entered into buying food, which is something we have never done pre-COVID. But because we have such a large network, we're able to get food pennies on the dollar. So if you're wanting to take action and address hunger in your community, I highly recommend, no matter where you live in the nation, don't go to the grocery store and buy it for yourself. Partner with the food bank, and obviously we can get food purchased pennies on the dollar so that you can use your valuable resources in other ways to help address poverty. Hunger in America is staggering, and it keeps me up at night. 47.3 million people live and experience food insecurity. 47.3 million. Here in Texas, let me go back actually. Of that 47 million, 13 million are children. Here in Texas, 5.3 million people live in food insecurity, including 1.6 million children. And then right here in Tarrant Area Food Bank Service Area, we serve 13 counties, including Tarrant. And our service area is the size of the state of Vermont, if that puts it in perspective. We serve side by side with more than 572,000 neighbors who are experiencing or live and face food insecurity, including 187,000 children. And so when we look at the neighbors that we're serving, when we talk about their stories, and I get to meet with thousands on a monthly basis, the stories we hear, our number one neighbor, as we call it, we coined a term from United Way, is called ALICE. And ALICE is an acronym that stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, and Employed. Many of the neighbors that we're serving are really having a hard time making it month to month, as my parents did. And if any of you are educators, you know the experience of that as well, because our teachers don't get paid enough, and they should. And we see, retired teachers in line that are on fixed incomes, and the tax mortgage went up $500 a month this past May. And so they are trying to figure out how to restabilize their budget. And so our number two neighbors, we see a single mother or single parent, most often with multiple children, usually a household of three. 3 to 4. And then secondly, older adults who live on fixed incomes, and the cost of inflation and skyrocketing costs really impact their budget year over year. And so as a food bank, we are really committed to not only making sure that we have partners all across our service area that can be there for our neighbors in those times, but that also that we're providing holistic services. And so we have a number of innovative projects that we have. However, we can't do it without our partners. We have more than 500 partners across our network that have community markets. It could be a library, a community center, a faith community, a nonprofit. We have distributions and satellite branches. We opened our first satellite branch out in Parker County, and we're working on one in Denton County to serve our rural communities. And recently, one thing I'm really excited about, we established a regional agriculture hub. Because one of the things we heard from the stories of our neighbors was that it's really hard to access fresh foods for a number of reasons. One, if you can get to it, that's a challenge. And two, once you get to the store that sells fresh produce, fresh protein, that's often the most expensive thing to put in the cart. And so oftentimes our neighbors have to make the impossible choice of like food to fill me up or food to like keep me healthy. And so we established an agriculture hub. The first phase was a $16 million project. And we, through a bunch of organizing and advocacy work, we raised that money through a public-private partnership. We received $8 million from Tarrant County and the city of Fort Worth total. We received $8 million from the Texas Department of Agriculture. We lobbied and advocated Congresswoman Kay Granger was the chair of appropriations to invest $3 million. And then we had private donors, individual small donors, and philanthropy invest another $8 million. And so we're creating a produce hub and also a community resource center that has all types of other services to help address causes of hunger. So that's a little bit about kind of the mechanics and the day-to-day work of food banking, and we can't do it without our partners. We also, as a part of our government relations team, have been really focused on policy solutions. And I know that many of y'all have been watching the news, and it seems like our lawmakers are more famous than our famous celebrities these days. And so just wanted to give y'all an update on our work at the state legislature and our federal legislative updates. We follow a relational organizing model, so we have what's called an advocacy advisory council of partners and neighbors with lived experience with hunger that help us inform our policy agendas every time we go down to Austin or every time we go to DC. And when we have the funds, we take people, with us, so that it's not just a food bank saying this is what food insecurity looks like, but it's us as neighbors with lived experience and partners with lived experience on the ground addressing the needs in our community, sharing these policy priorities. So this past legislative session, we focused really on a couple of things, food access, and secondly, addressing the causes of hunger. And I just want to give you all a couple updates on that. One of the things we saw with the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, here in Texas was that folks would apply and food banks would help them apply for these benefits that they're potentially eligible for to help them bridge the gap in their grocery budget. But once they submit the application, because the state had an archaic system to process those applications and because they were understaffed, it would take 3 to 6 months for their determination up or down. So if I'm facing food insecurity and I'm worried about food today, I don't really have much hope when submitting the application that those benefits are going to be there on time. 6 months is too long, let alone a week. And so we heard loud and clear from our neighbors, and we advocated together to modernize that archaic system. It was a lot of manual entries, not a lot of technology. And we were able to get a big win in securing $300 million to be invested in the Health and Human Services tiers system. That system is now up to date and modernized. It will be up to date and modernized, which will mean quicker turnaround times for SNAP application determinations. The second thing we focused on was we recognized that folks that are enrolled in Medicaid oftentimes don't have access to nutrition services. My mom, when she was diagnosed with breast cancer, our budget changed because we had to pay for chemotherapy. And so it was a struggle all the time to try to buy healthy food, and sometimes we'd go to Chick-fil-A because that was healthy-ish until they banned DEI. Sorry if you're for that. I don't know if anyone here is, but now we don't go to Chick-fil-A at all. Anyways, I digress. But we decided to launch a Food is Medicine program, and food is medicine, and we were able to get House Bill 26 passed, which basically allowed for an in lieu of services waiver, so that a healthcare facility, when a patient comes in and presents their Medicaid benefits, that they could also refer them to nutrition services, healthy medically tailored meals, which we produce in partnership with CVS at our food bank, and that Medicaid would reimburse the medical facility for doing that. And so not only are they getting health care and prescriptions, they're also getting nutrition and nutrition services and education alongside of that. So that passed. Now for the bad news. We've been working for years to try to solve local child hunger. And one program that we were really focused on was summer EBT. Summer EBT, many of y'all know, is a proven method for addressing summer hunger for children when they don't have regular access to school meals. This benefit would have unlocked $450 million in federal aid that's already appropriated for this program to Texas. And all it would have cost was a 50-50 cost share and admin costs between the state and the feds. The state was only on the hook for $60 million for $450 million of benefits. What does this mean to the neighbor? Well, the neighbor would receive $120 per child per household, meaning that $120 would be loaded on their summer or their EBT card. These are folks that are already eligible for SNAP and likely already participating in the program because they're experiencing crisis, and they would be able to swipe that card and be able to supplement the meals that kids would normally get in the school year. And so it passed the House and the Senate, and it was on its way to our governor, and our governor apparently didn't agree that that should be a thing, and so he vetoed it. He vetoed it, saying that the big, beautiful bill was creating uncertainty in summer EBT, and that SNAP cuts would affect summer EBT, but they're funded two separate ways. And so actually the cuts to SNAP didn't directly impact summer EBT in the way that he described. And so our work continues. We shall overcome. We will continue to advocate for ending summer childhood hunger, and we'll take that in the next session. The last thing is there's a lot of manual checks on SNAP. There's very little fraud, waste, and abuse, contrary to some's opinion, less than 1%. And that data comes from the federal government. So we wanted to reduce manual checks at the 6-month period. Every SNAP participant has to re-verify their income, et cetera, every 12 months. But the HHS department here in the state was checking it every 6 months. Manually, and they're short-staffed and they don't have good technology, and so it was creating additional wait times and burden on families. And so we wanted to automate that with verified data verification technology, and that didn't receive a hearing at any committee, so we will be continuing that work. The last thing I'll just give you all an update on, and I will gladly take questions if there's time, is the federal side of our work. Again, for the first time in our food bank's history, we were able to take neighbors and partners who were on the ground doing this work to Washington, D.C. We were able to take them to the White House and to a tour of the Capitol, but even more importantly than that, we were able to have meaningful conversations with our lawmakers and with important key legislators on the House and Senate Agriculture Committee, which is responsible for many of the bills that impact food insecurity and also kind of tangentially poverty. And for the past 6 months, we have been really working terribly hard at preventing all of the damage that's been caused by federal cuts to critical safety net programs that our neighbors who are experiencing crisis depend on to not fall into despair. And so our food bank joined Feeding America Network. I serve on the Feeding America Network's legislative committee that helps organize and establish priorities with grassroots engagement. And we went there to try to inform our lawmakers of the impacts of federal cuts. Just to put it in scale, back in March, our food bank was notified, as all food banks were across the country, that we would be experiencing federal cuts. And in March, we experienced the ending and cut of the Local Farm Purchase Act, which basically allowed for food banks to buy market rate produce and agriculture products from local farmers. They cut that, and that was about $2+ million just here in investment in our local agriculture economy. In addition to that, they canceled 30 truckloads of produce that USDA had subsidized from farmers and producers here in our nation that couldn't get their food in the market. So the food is already harvested. And so we got 30 truckloads canceled, and that food basically went to waste. And so the total impact for us just in March was $4.2 million plus 30 truckloads canceled, which meant we had to scramble to try to find that much food, and we order food a quarter ahead. And so in May, we had a severe food shortage. The second thing that happened was the budget reconciliation process came up in June, which is quite abnormal, to say the least. That budget bill passed 51-50 in the Senate, with Vice President Vance being the tiebreaker, and 218-214 in the House. And so when you hear in the news that certain caucuses are looking for 5 votes, that kind of explains how close every vote is in DC. And so the impact of that was $211 billion in SNAP cuts over 10 years. 58 million per year loss in our service area right here. These are dollars that not only help families that are facing crisis living in food insecurity, it's also dollars that serve as economic stimulus in our grocery stores that have razor thin profit margins. So if you like your local Kroger or your local HEB, know that they really struggle to make profit margins, and SNAP is a really important benefit for our local economy as well. For every 1 meal that we can provide as food banks, SNAP provides 9 meals, plus the economic impact. So when you talk about cutting programs like SNAP at that scale, you basically create instability in the hunger relief network, and you create more demand than there is supply, especially when we rely on rescue donated product. And so the Feed America Network every year distributes about 6 billion meals to neighbors experiencing hunger. This cut was 9 billion in meals, 9 million bills a year. So that's more than 100% of what we do in service to our community. So essentially, we'd have to double our operations overnight. Additionally, it added additional regulations for parents of children with kids 14 and older, which basically makes it harder for working parents to be able to put food on the table. And they also expanded additional requirements on participants or folks applying for SNAP, raising the age from 55 to 64. So basically you have to really scrap and be on your own until you're 64 to really reliably be able to count on a SNAP benefit program when you're facing crisis. It also cut the Thrifty Food Plan, which gives the USDA secretary, who's from right here in our backyard. She lives near the zoo, in case y'all are wondering. And it cut the Thrifty Food Plan, which gives the USDA secretary the authority to make modest adjustments to the SNAP benefit to accommodate for rising food costs. So with that cut of the Thrifty Food Plan, it limits that authority, which means that the SNAP dollar will continue to lose its power year over year, and families will be able to buy less and less. And then it also, in addition to that, Medicaid was cut $930 billion. I think it impacted 8 million Americans, meaning they would lose their insurance, which then will throw them into a cycle of poverty inevitably. And so this bill was not beautiful for neighbors experiencing food insecurity, let alone poverty. And so it necessitates that we have more work to do to advocate and to organize our communities, to educate our communities about the impacts of these kind of bills. And even more importantly, to organize relationally like y'all are doing to educate our lawmakers on the impact and to educate folks that influence them as well. Right? If we're educating influencers of influencers, right, we're able to organize power even better. Nonetheless, we continue to work really hard. There are some wins that we've been able to secure at the federal level. Recently, we have been really working hard to educate USDA on the impact of these cuts. And so in response, just recently, USDA announced $230 million in additional food purchases through the Emergency Food Assistance Program that gets directed to food banks. So certainly not $211 billion worth of repair, but it's certainly a win. The second thing we are working on is there was recently a bipartisan bill presented, which y'all should definitely tell your members you support. It's called the Local Farmers Feeding Our Communities Act. And it's essentially going to replace the Local Farmer Purchase Act, which basically provides food banks dollars to buy produce and protein from local farmers. And so we are constantly advocating for strengthening the agriculture sector, and obviously food banks are a part of that as well. And then lastly, every 5 years, Congress has to pass a farm bill. The farm bill is like, it authorizes all of the nutrition or several nutrition programs, the Emergency Food Assistance Program, SNAP, the Commodity Supplemental Food Program, which is like our senior box program. If y'all have ever seen the senior boxes, that's a federally appropriated program. And the Farm Bill authorizes that program, all of those programs. So if those programs aren't included in the Farm Bill, those programs go away. The second thing the Farm Bill does is it's like a credit card limit. It sets the spending limit each year that lawmakers can budget for that program at a maximum. And so it's important in the Farm Bill that we make sure that those spending limits are appropriately sized for the amount of food insecurity and poverty in our country. And so we're advocating to make sure that our lawmakers strengthen those nutrition programs in the Farm Bill. That vote will come up September, October, maybe as late as December. But they're 2 years late on it. And so I've never advocated and organized for a bill so long in my life. I think it was supposed to be renewed. It was last renewed in 2018. It's supposed to be done every 3 to 5 years. So it's supposed to be passed in 2022, 23, and here we are almost in 26. And we've been organizing since 2020 on the Farm Bill. And so that goes to show just how slow and dysfunctional DC has become. And so there's also work to make sure we get lawmakers there who are willing to go to work and to not play DC politics at the expense of our very lives. And so nonetheless, sorry I rambled on, but I thought it was really important to give you the full context so that as y'all go into your other exercises throughout the day, at least you have one bit of context to like how food insecurity impacts those experiencing poverty. Be happy to answer any questions at this time if there's time. Or yes, sir.
Does Michael have recently we met with the legislative director for Van Dot, and he was telling us they had a meeting with somebody connected with the food bank. It was telling them that food insecurity was defined as living, anybody live more than a mile and a half from the grocery store.
No.
Which seems ridiculous. What's the definition you use when you talk about food insecurity? How do you qualify?
So essentially, food insecurity has a number of factors, including income, access to food, household size, cost of living in that area, and the cost to afford food and whether or not that matches. That's kind of just a very lay person's a definition of it. However, there's a technical definition, which I won't bore you with, but if you go to Map the Meal Gap, it's Feeding America's tool online that allows you to not only explore the definition of how it's calculated, but even more importantly, to search the number of food insecurity by congressional district, by zip code, by census tract across the entire country. And so food insecurity is real. Some people, some people will try to undermine the credibility of people's lived experience with hunger and say that it's their fault. And I think that that is just a shame, and it's a cop-out from really addressing poverty as I believe we're called to do.
Right, yeah. One of the other things is I know that in the big brutal bill, one of the things they talked about was increasing this, if states have a certain error rate with SNAP, is it?
I didn't mention that yet.
Then they have to contribute more.
Yes.
How's Texas's error rate?
So the way the SNAP benefit works is the admin costs are split by the state and feds 50-50. And the benefit itself, the benefit that gets loaded on a neighbor's card, is paid 100% through the federal budgeting process. The state, the Congress in this bill, this budget bill, decided to create what's called a cost share, which basically means that any state that has an error rate above 10 thresholds, it was like 3%, 5%, 10%, something like that, they would be responsible for increased amounts of the cost to load the card. So Texas's error rate is above 5%, so we're on the hook. I think I may have written it down here. I believe we're on the hook for $700 million a year for the benefit.
Ouch.
Which is a whole lot. When you talk about, we had a surplus this past session of 30 plus billion, that's almost 1 billion. And so that is a significant amount. And what it actually does is it doesn't address hunger. It actually disincentivizes states that already didn't want to implement the program. It gives them an excuse to not do it. The additional thing that they put on the cost sharing decision was that they would no longer split, the feds would no longer commit to their longstanding obligation and commitment to cost share 50-50. And they increased that cost share to the states by 25%. So now the states are on the hook for admin costs, 75% of the admin costs, the cost to administrate the benefit within the state. And so not only are we being asked to pay more in the benefit, which is a federally appropriated, federally mandated obligation, but secondly, we're not splitting it 50-50 right down the middle. And so that's going to disincentivize states like Texas from really investing in a long-standing, long-proven benefit program that has already been revamped and reimagined. That's why it's called SNAP. There used to be a food stamp program. SNAP is different from that, and it has been proven to be one of the most effective tools in the hunger relief national hunger relief strategy to end hunger.
So these changes might induce Texas politicians to withdraw from the program?
It would reduce access to the SNAP benefit, certainly, in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Well, the thing I noticed when you were talking is that we focused on federal legislation, and you focused on a lot of state.
All three levels.
But you do all three levels. And so I want to have a conversation with you to partner on how we can, when we meet with our members of Congress locally,
we would love that.
To coordinate with you to talk about these things.
We would love that. Let's.
Other people have questions? We got a few more minutes.
Do you find that here in Texas, a lot of lawmakers are passing legislation against benefits like SNAP based on stereotypes, like those who are poor are just too lazy or they don't want to work?
Yes, there's a number of reasons why elected officials vote the way they do. One of them being misinformed in that way. That's why organizing and centering our neighbors with lived experience with the issues that we're working on is so important. People may discredit the source of a particular fact, but they can't discredit your story. And so we work really hard in our organizing to make sure that we're centering the stories of the neighbors that we serve, because those stories are powerful and they can't be refuted and they're undeniable. I think the other thing I would say that's not said a lot, and I might get ran out of town if I say it too much longer, is that there is there is a power structure behind our elected officials that has a very strong grip on what they do. And that power structure is mostly ran by political elites and powerful billionaires who have no interest in our interests. And as a result, you can go into a meeting at Rivercrest Country Club with a member of Congress, be able to pray over a meal together, share a cookie in half, and they tell you that I can't vote this way because I won't be in office if I do it. That I will be primaried, and that whoever primaries me will be told to primary me by very powerful people, and I will no longer have a vote. So I know this is the wrong vote to make, and yet I can't do it. That is the political structure that we live in right now, that we have powerful billionaire elites who get more representation and more votes than we, the people. And as a result, we have to recognize that being a pressure point as well, right? And so when we're organizing, not at the food bank, I'm going to take off my food bank hat for a second, but when you're organizing, it's also important to recognize power, right? You're talking to a lawmaker, yes, but you also have to recognize when you're organizing who has influence. So for example, when we go to DC, we always take someone from HEB because everybody loves HEB. And there's also a billionaire that funds HEB. And so it's really important that we understand kind of get real about the dynamics of votes. Yes, it's about like a bunch of isms, and yes, it's about being misinformed and having bias. Yes, it's about constituencies and who they represent, and they're elected to represent their people. But I think even more importantly, I've seen that our political elites, our political consultants who get paid for every ad, every mailer, every text message, that get paid for running candidates, whether the candidates win or lose, and powerful billionaires who get tax abatements, right? Who get tax cuts, who get all types of incentives for buying elected officials to vote their priorities. In addition to organizing, it's important to have lobbyists as well. Feeding America, Feeding Texas, I'm sure results invest in lobbyists because lobbyists have those relationships. One member of Congress told me, Jared, if I could get you in front of Secretary Kennedy and Secretary Rollins, there's no doubt they would agree with you and we would get some things done. But I can't get you in that room. You're not allowed in that room. So we got to get a lobbyist who is allowed in that room that can tell the message for you, right? And so this is chess. Actually, it's not chess, it's mahjong, if y'all have ever played mahjong. It's not even chess. But I feel compelled at this point, this season in my life, to tell the truth of what I've seen as an elected official and the pressures that are incredible amount of pressures that are placed on our elected officials by very powerful people and systems.
My name is Tom. Going backwards to the commentary you had on error rates and numbers, etc., I had a question as what are the criteria? What constitutes an error to trigger all this reduction and division of finances? I had some interaction with SNAP people here recently, and I'm beginning to see that perhaps I pushed a button I didn't know. They're very nice because they're worried about error rates. We have the state of Texas running the SNAP program. I'm not impressed.
Yeah.
And now I ran into some very nice people in my interaction, but I'm fully aware it's a state bureaucracy and they're not really good at hiring people, training people, or running programs. I'm well aware of that.
Yeah.
So now we have a criteria for error rates.
Yeah.
With people that create errors?
Yeah, I am not an expert on error rates. There are very low error rates in SNAP in terms of this whole national rhetoric about whether or not there's fraud in the program, which it's already been studied. And so what I will say about error rates, this is part of the challenge, right, with these type of policies is they make them so convoluted and complex that then so I'll say it two ways. So one, the error rate is not the actual. It's a means to an end. when you have a national agenda that wants to get rid of SNAP, you have to try to make it so burdensome because it's really political suicide to just do away with it altogether. So you chip away at it with requirement after requirement. You put so much red tape on it that eventually it collapses. And so I try to educate at least our organizing committees around, like, yes, the error rate's important, but don't get stuck in the nuances of that.
They don't have a definition of error.
Right, and so it's very confusing. The agencies that are handling this at the state are still working through. States are very confused about what it means and is my error rate really my error rate, et cetera. So there's a lot of conversations going on around error rates and what it means for that. But it's a stick. It's not a carrot. It's not incentivizing states to improve error rates. It's incentivizing states to not invest in the program, which is.
Hello, my name is Frank, and I'm from First UU in Dallas, retired everything. Are there additional negative surprises? One of the things that in that bad bill did was to make some, especially the Medicaid cuts, come after the 2026 election. Are there food consequences that are also going to spring after this election that are not in effect before the 2026 election?
If I understand your question, is there any more cuts or any more impacts to nutrition before this election? You bring up a good point that, like, these policies, because powerful political elites are involved in these policy decisions, they're also making calculus on the next election and what will rile people up the most to get them out to vote for them again. And so the budget bill didn't reduce the deficit, it added to the deficit. And it also did that off the backs of, like, people experiencing poverty. At the same time reducing our revenue by cutting taxes on wealthy folks, right? And so that's one part. There's going to be 2 or 3 or maybe 4, I don't know how many yet, rescissions, basically more cuts that Congress is considering, the party in power is considering right now, that would have further consequences on nutrition programs and all types of other critical programs that the federal government is responsible for. And all of that is, including the things you're hearing in the news, all of that is gearing up to try to preserve power for the party in power right now. All of this is political chess as well, which is part of the calculation when you're creating organizing movements, is recognizing what the end game is on the political side. And really it's to maintain power for the rest of this administration so that more priorities can be implemented without much debate or much pushback from the legislative body that's responsible for sending the bill to the president to sign. So we are playing offense and defense, as we always have, to try to defend our communities from the terrible impacts of decisions like what I described today, while also playing offense to try to get very much so needed resources, policies, decisions made that'll help lift our neighbors out of the crises that they're facing and ultimately to help end hunger and contribute to ending poverty here in our community. So yes, and please stay engaged. If you want to learn more about this, we have a network, an advocacy network, a newsletter that we send out regular alerts. You can go to our website at tafb.org. You can also email me. My email is drjaredwilliams@gmail.com. That's my personal email, so be happy to grab coffee or to send you any information I know, not with my food bank hat, obviously, to help you as you're doing your work in the communities that you're serving. So thank you all again. Thanks, Craig, for the time. I have 2 babies to go get back to. Saturday I prep for Sunday, and I help with my babies.
You're the right crowd, because this choir knows your tune.
Awesome.
So thank you so much. I'm so glad we invited you to come here, and you have informed us so well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Much love, y'all. Thank y'all.
Tiffany is up next, but let's give a 5-minute break if anyone needs to run to the bathroom. Tiffany, I'll let you make your way up, or you might run to the bathroom. All right. want to use? Take your seats, please. Take your seats, please. Kristen, why don't you take Jared out in the hall for those conversations? Take your seats, please. Tiffany Tagbo is the group leader for Oklahoma City. And she recently went, are you a fellow, a results fellow?
also,
Yes, this
yep.
year. And I'll let her explain the results fellow program to people because they don't know what it is. And also the EOP program, if you would. But you just went to DC and had some amazing meetings, right?
I did. I absolutely did.
So take it away, Tiffany.
Yep, the fellow program is really just an 8-month program to really immerse some of our advocates in what we do as results, to train them up, to give them opportunities, really just to learn more about advocating for the issues that we stand for when it comes to results. We have other fellows in the room today too also. Natalia, we spent time in DC together. So yeah, that was an amazing time, and I'll speak a little bit more about that when it comes to it. To begin, I never thought I would be behind a pulpit, so maybe this is a foreshadowing. I'm gonna talk really just a little bit more about what Jared began. This is really about fighting hunger at home. You know, what are we hearing? What are we facing? And what can we do as advocates? My session is, of course, going to focus on more of food insecurity and what that looks like in Oklahoma. We'll speak, as Craig stated, a little bit more about what we've been hearing when we went to DC from some of our lawmakers, and really just to encourage sustained long-term advocacy and mutual support amongst us all. So thank you all for being here today. We really do appreciate it. To begin, anytime we speak about poverty and insecurity, it's a heavy topic. Why? Because we think of our sons, our daughters, we think of our friends, we think of our elders, and really our neighbors in the community and those who we become caretakers for. These, of course, are our most vulnerable demographics when it comes to food insecurity. And so these are, when we say most vulnerable, they are the hardest hit when we talk about food security. And it's unfathomable that we would have to think about some of the people we love going without the proper food and nutrition. But the reality is, this is what millions of families in the U.S. face each and every day. Food insecurity is a problem that is going to take a community to solve. And so this presentation, once again, it'll further explore some of what Jared spoke about. To begin, as of 2024, 15.4% of Oklahomans were food insecure. That translates into 745,000 individuals. Oklahoma was 5th in the nation for food insecurity, and it's consecutively ranked high in food insecurity. Compared to Texas, Texas is actually 2nd, which was it was very shocking to me to find out that Texas was 2nd in the nation for food insecurity. You've heard a little bit more about those stats from Jared, but just to benchmark and see where that ranks, the national average for food insecurity is 13.5%. We know some of the drivers of food insecurity are poverty, low wages, unemployment, underemployment, child care gaps, and also inadequate access to public benefits like SNAP. So even when we find that there are people in our community who are eligible for SNAP, they may not apply because they may not know how the system works, or they may not even have access to DHS offices to apply for these benefits. Part of the reason why I do what I do, I want to speak a little bit about 9 years ago. I have my daughter here with me, and this is really it's a full circle moment, because I think about when I was pregnant with her. I was working as a child welfare worker. Her burnout rate is extremely high. And when it came crashing down, it all came crashing down. I found out I was pregnant with her just as I was forced to leave that position. So, of course, it was an extreme amount of stress on myself and my family. My husband he was in the process of getting his visa approved, so he had not yet made it to the U.S. And so that was another circumstance that we were dealing with. But I was blessed enough to know how to apply for SNAP, how to apply for Medicaid, where to go for those benefits, because I worked for that agency. But even so, again, it was extreme amount of stress. And I say without those programs, my daughter possibly wouldn't be sitting here today, because I recall having a medical emergency while I was giving birth. It required me to actually get a blood transfusion. There is no way I could have afforded that on like being unemployed and not having an income. And if I was in a place where we didn't have Medicaid, again, I probably wouldn't be here. If I was in a place where we didn't have benefits like SNAP, I probably would never have been able to sustain a healthy pregnancy to even get to the point where I could give birth. So again, that's why I'm an expert on poverty, and that's why I do what I do, because I know what it's like for families to experience food insecurity. I know what it's like to live in poverty. I know what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck and literally just sometimes doing your best and have nothing work out. When it comes to lawmakers, what are they saying? There's just this pervasive myth that people who are impoverished don't want to work. They're lazy. They need to go get a job. But we know that's not the reality. A lot of our families are working, but they're working on wages that are not enough to sustain any family. And we talk about inflation now, and it's even worse. In Oklahoma, the minimum wage is still, I believe, $7.25. Even if you make double of the minimum wage, it's still not enough to even afford a house with the way costs have dramatically increased. And so when we find that lawmakers are cutting benefits, when they're introducing work requirements, it increases the burdens on families to prove that they meet requirements to receive these benefits. When I spoke to some of the lawmakers, that's part of my strategy. I always tell my personal story to let them know, like, poverty is something, it's not something that people want to be in. Like, you don't choose poverty, unfortunately. Sometimes poverty just chooses you. And it's up to you to do what you can to essentially pull yourself up out of poverty, which is what lawmakers believe, that you can just pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Well, what if somebody doesn't have bootstraps? What if they don't even have the boots to even start to work their way out of poverty? Just this past year, I've spent a considerable amount of time away from my family, working 2 full-time jobs, going back to school, just so my children don't have to experience what it's like to be in poverty. Because I've been determined not to have that cycle of generational poverty continue on with them. And so there's many families who don't even get that opportunity. They don't have the extended network. They don't have the family members that are there to watch their children while they're working full-time jobs. So they really are in impossible circumstances. When it comes to food insecurity, it came at an interesting time because our superintendent of education mandated that all public schools had to provide free lunches for children in Oklahoma. That caused a huge issue because we had school districts step up and say, we don't have the money to provide free school lunch for our children. And the fact that the superintendent is saying that we have budget surpluses is a lie, and we don't know where he's getting that information from. So if you could only imagine, if our school districts don't have enough money to give our kids free lunches, how can they afford the negative and harmful effects that are going to come from the passage of this big, beautiful bill? I mean, the reality is they won't be able to afford it. Oklahoma is going to take a very hard hit. And I ask my lawmakers, do you all have something to replace what you're cutting in benefits from SNAP and Medicaid? Of course, they don't have a plan. And for them, they didn't even know what the effects of what this bill was going to cause when I asked. So I say, what are you going to do when this bill takes effect and then our state has to pay? And their response literally was that we will take a look at the situation when it occurs, and then we'll write legislation then. By then, it's going to be too late because we already have too many families in crisis. So why must we wait for our families to be in crisis for you to respond? Why would you vote for this legislation when you didn't understand the impact in the first place? As many of you know, Jared stated that there's this huge burden that they're facing in terms of being primaried. Exactly, thank you, of being primaried. Well, guess what? We in this room, as citizens, we should hold more power. They should be more afraid of us than they should be afraid of being primaried or losing power or facing, yeah. Thank you. Or facing these huge backlashes from a president or even from lawmakers. And so I think it's up to us to get them to that place where they do become afraid of the people more than they are afraid of the establishment. And also, when it came to our meeting, we found that the legislative staff and our legislators, they gave us a lot of pushback. They became very defensive. And they literally just shut down, and some of them didn't even want to hear what we had to say. But that was okay, because my motto was, I'm still going to be here. I'm still going to speak out. I'm still going to use my voice, whether you refuse to listen or not. I'm going to be here, and I'm not going to let that discourage me. And I think that's what I would say to a lot of us. I mean, we can't. Thank you. We literally cannot allow them to push us off or push us to the side or allow them to treat us as if we don't matter, not when we hold the power. We faced a lot of lawmakers who were misinformed about SNAP. Like, they had no idea that our children who qualify for free lunch, they qualify based on federal requirements. A lot of our school districts use that. And so when it comes to cutting of SNAP, we know that it's going to trickle down to our kids, and a lot of our kids are going to lose free lunches. That's something that we had to educate our lawmakers on. Now, whether they believe it or not is a different story. But once again, when it comes to really just this big foolish bill, we're seeing that Oklahoma is going to definitely be hit hard. How hard? That's going to be another matter. We have been lobbying, of course, since January. And what I was hearing from the very beginning was, well, can't the food banks and can't the churches and can't the nonprofits provide the support that the impoverished or that our communities need? And my very response was, they can provide some relief, but they can't shoulder that burden alone. Like, it takes the law. It takes us as a community. It takes nonprofits. It takes all of us. And when you remove one of those pieces, and then we run into the crisis that we are currently facing, when we see that the government is essentially trying to remove themselves out of that piece and not be responsible and provide for the people in our communities who need it the most. In Oklahoma, we have a combination of not only just SNAP, we have incentives, we have our food bank, and actually we have programs like Double Up Oklahoma, where if you're in specific communities and you go to the store and you purchase fruits and vegetables, they will provide an extra $1 for every $1 you spend. The summer EBT program, our governor foolishly declined to participate, but thankfully our tribe stepped up to provide summer EBT for the families that benefit from it. But when we talk about all these things, I mean, they're still at risk when we talk about funds being cut. And so these are things that we have to continue to educate our lawmakers on. We know that even if our food banks, even if our nonprofits, if they had all the resources and money in the world, they still would face issues such as getting people the help they need, especially in rural areas. Like, how do we get people to sign up for these programs? How do we get them connected to the resources? How do we get them transportation? Like, there's still a lot involved, even if they had the money and the resources that they need. And so, really, it's been a difficult political environment, and really, as my presentation comes to the end, I just want to reiterate, no matter how much frustration that we're facing, no matter how much anger, no matter how much of an emotional toil we're going through, if you can imagine, these are what our families in poverty go through every day. You know, we got a touch of that, because just as we thought things couldn't get worse with our government and with legislation, they absolutely got worse. And for our families, that's their everyday life. You know, just when they think things can't get worse, they absolutely get worse. Whether it's a bill from a doctor, or whether it's having to pay back a shark loan that they took out just to try to make ends meet. And so I want you guys to use what we're feeling as fuel for our passion to continue the advocacy that we do. Because the reality is, once again, we're part of the solution, and we can't give up. We can't lose hope, no matter how hard or how frustrating things may get. I mean, what we continue to do is we take heart in. We celebrate every win that we get. We just got a win when it came to global funds. We keep using our voices. Most important, we keep leaning on one another, especially when things get difficult. And that's something that I love about Results, because I believe that's one thing that we do really well. We continue to lean on one another when we need it the most. For me, food insecurity it's really not a failure of individuals. It's a failure of a system. But again, together we can be part of the solution. Every conversation, every letter, every act of service matters. Like, you don't need to do everything. You just need to do something and do it with heart. We are not powerless. We are powerful together. So let's keep showing up for each other. Let us keep showing up for our communities. And let us keep showing up for a future where no one goes hungry. Because advocacy is not just policy. Advocacy is love in action. Did we have any questions?
Representative Cole, who's chair of the House Appropriations Committee, right?
Yes.
How did that go?
To be honest, that went very well. I mean, his staff was very receptive. That was the one meeting, to be honest, that we walked away from feeling very hopeful out of all the meetings we did in DC.
Well, that's very important, because people like that are called cardinals in Washington, D.C. Like the Roman Catholic Church, the cardinal is very powerful. Well, an appropriations chair is a very powerful person in the political establishment. And for you to have a positive meeting with Representative Cole, can you tell me some of the, what made you feel positive about that?
Absolutely. To be honest, he was very receptive. Even his staff, like when we spoke, they listened. We were able to thank them, which, to be honest, they took very well, because I believe very rarely in this political environment are lawmakers being thanked for their actions. That's because they're not taking good actions. Right? But he was just very receptive, very open. There was no pushback, was not defensive, like we received from even staff members from the two offices we had visited earlier in the day from the senators' offices.
Yeah, Tiffany, I was in DC. I wasn't with you at your meetings, but I heard that you had to deal with some resistance in some of those other meetings. And I know that folks in this room have members of Congress that it's been very hard to even establish a relationship with, but then to cultivate a relationship. And you've done both of those things, I think, very well with offices that have been very hard to get into. Yeah. So could you speak a little bit about dealing with resistance, dealing with, maybe like an unwelcoming gesture from these members of Congress, and how you've persisted through that and how you're going to persist through that?
Thank you for that question, Joanna. You partly answered it. Persistence is the answer to resistance. And part of what I've learned to do, even from like a lot of my careers, like when it came to like having to go into somebody's home and tell them you're taking their children, it's just always remain respectful, remain polite. Thank them for issues that you're able to meet on. And if you're not able to agree with their position, just don't argue. I mean, it's very easy to meet hostility with hostility. And it's very easy to become frustrated and become upset and speak from that tone of voice. But I think that just makes it even harder to build relationship. But when we are consistent in remaining polite and when we are consistent in remaining respectful, I believe that helps like tear down some of the walls that they've built.
Oh, hi. I'm sorry I didn't introduce myself. My name is Joanna DeStefano, and I am a staff member at Results, and I am staff support particularly for this region. I have the pleasure of working for Tiffany since I came on staff with the Oklahoma group, and Craig and Ann and all the group leaders here in Texas.
Other questions for Tiffany? Anyone else? Yes. Here, let's wait for the mic, please. I know we can hear you. You can hear me without the mic too.
Right.
Use the mic.
Sure. I'm Frank Morris. I'm an old retired professor and senior foreign service officer, among other things. But one of the things that you face is not only the fear of being primary. One of the things that modern economics from Nobel Prize winners and political science shows that the response of the representatives is not primarily to the voters, but it's primarily to the donors. And that this is really significant. And I wonder whether we have gone on the offense in two ways. One of the ways is these donors that, for instance, were so quickly to get rid of DEI, and folks really moved from Target to Costco, and they've felt it. Target has really felt it. And I wonder if we really have not focused enough on that in other areas, and in other economic areas. But the second thing is, can we ever expect to convince those in power who claim Christianity or claim others without us going on the attack of those cultural issues, i.e. that you claim you're a follower of Christ, but you ignore the strangers or the Sermon on the Mount, or even what the Old Testament says, hundreds of references to the poor, and none to gay and lesbian or LGBT, or the things that they're focused. So do you use those techniques, or do you have any suggestions for any of the rest of us who should?
Yeah, I would say there are, I know, specific lawmakers. I know in Oklahoma that are very heavily religious. And for those who are, I would absolutely use that tactic. Because if you say that you're a Christian, if you say that you believe in a God, well, guess what? The Bible says this. So why aren't we holding to this standard? And for those lawmakers, I believe they do listen. Sometimes we don't think that we have an impact. Sometimes we don't think that they listen, but they just may be listening. And it may deter them from making future bad decisions. Because sometimes it's up to us to remind them of where they come from. And I would say you did speak earlier about them, what was it, holding some sort of resistance, or whether or not we've gone on the offense in terms of how they're voting. Is that what you were asking? Well, and to that, I would say we've seen several movements that have been very effective. Just like Target. Target was the movement against Texas. Oh, Tesla. Okay, sorry. You know what? I believe when we start boycotting these places, when we stop giving them our money, that's going to speak louder than words. I mean, I mentioned Target only because Target was most recently a store that was affected by that. It was a specific demographic that said, if you won't cater to us, or not necessarily cater, that's a bad word, but if you won't, promote some of the issues that we believe in, if you won't promote equality, then we won't shop at your stores. Target has seen a major decline in dollars, and it's impacting them, and they're listening, and they're changing their strategy. So I think we have to use maybe some of those same tactics with our lawmakers. We don't have, money is not a capital, but our votes are. And I think all too often we have too many people who are not voting, or too many people who are voting hoping for a change. So that's where our grassroots efforts come into play, because maybe it's me talking to a neighbor saying, hey, look, the past 50 years they've implemented tax cuts and it has not trickled down, and it has not helped us. So why do we keep voting this way? Why do we keep voting for politicians who don't care for us? And I think another strategy that I love that Results utilizes is the media. That writing LTEs, writing op-eds, getting our issue out in front of millions of people, that's a huge effective strategy also. And I believe that's part of the reason why we see a lot of lawmakers trying to go on defense and say, hey, we passed tax cuts. This is a good deal, because I believe a lot of us have spoken out in the media and said, no, this is not a good deal and this is what's going to happen. And people are taking note. Did I answer your question? Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Our good friend here, Mark Coates, who's a member of the Austin Global Group, wrote a letter to the editor that was so provocative that the next day or so, Senator Cornyn and staff responded to Mark's letter to the editor.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome.
So that's an example of using the media to ensure accountability. So, time for one more question.
So in Results, we have what's called the champion scale. And when we're working with a member of Congress, they can fall on a champion scale all the way down from being against what we are for. But if they move up to being neutral, we have made progress, because then they're not telling their buddy, well, this is a bad bill and, we're not going to vote for it or whatever. But then they go up the scale to where they can become a champion and they lead on our legislation. But I just think that's a good way to judge what kind of progress we're making with our members of Congress.
Introduce yourself, please.
I'm Eloise Sutherland, and I am the group leader in Austin.
That was a good point, Eloise.
Hello to everyone. We're so glad you're here. I'm Kathleen Duncan, group leader in Houston. My question is for clarity to Alexis. Do we, those little, if we have done it, we put the little paper in there, or we want to do it and we put the paper?
I'd say either way. If it's an action that relates to, just picture like senator, congressperson. Think of those three buckets that way. So if it's an action that relates to doing something, interacting in some way with your members of Congress, senator, congressperson. Yes. Thanks for that. This is Joanna again, and I want to reply to Eloise's statement about the champion scale. Wins can be hard to find, as Tiffany was noting. If your member of Congress moves anywhere up on the champion scale, I want you to celebrate it in the same way you would as if that person became a champion for that issue. And I say this as somebody who is represented by a person who will likely never support any of Results issues. But if I can get him to stop making stupid, cruel, insensitive posts on social media, all right, that is a great big win. And I want everybody to have a stake in that. And I want you guys to have that too.
Before we leave for break and before you move to the next question, I want you guys to know that we have these cute little keychains if you would like one. And this is just to remind you that you are seen, you are heard, and we do appreciate you for all the work that you do, especially during this hard time when so many are just giving up and walking away.
This is not a question, and I am not saying this as a Results staff person, although my name is Erilyn, and I am on Results staff. I am taking off my staff hat just because I want to respond to what our friend back here just said about the church, because those two worlds don't usually collide for me in Mississippi, and they collide here through that question. So I just want to answer, like, if we hear people supporting these harmful decisions, with their Christian faith as a barrier or a shield and as incentive and justification in doing this. As Christians, I encourage us to call that out because we have a responsibility to do that. God doesn't just say this one thing. We have to take scripture in totality. So it's not just God said this one verse, we're going to handpick that. God said, honor our strangers, take care of the needy, take care of widows, stand for social justice. If we look at the life of Jesus, which is supposed to be our example, depending on what your faith is, these Christians who stand behind that is their faith. His whole life, the example that we are to follow is flipping over tables and challenging the status quo and standing in favor of social justice. So I encourage us to, if these Congress people like mine in Mississippi are saying, well, we're doing this because of the Bible, well, what about this verse? What about that verse? And I'm talking collective Christians. I am not in this number, but we are saying that we're justifying our actions by saying that we are protecting, I'm just going to say it, babies, because a lot of Mississippi is they're one issue voters. We're saying that we're protecting babies, and we think that we are justified and we're taking vengeance, but the Bible says, vengeance is mine, says the Lord. So while you think that you're being a judge for this, you are still going to be judged by your actions. So how do you think that the Lord is going to judge you for all these other things? So I would call them out.
Amen.
I would do it in the media, all the things. And now I'm going to put my results hat back on. So
Yes.
Thank you, Erilyn. Thank you, Tiffany.
You're welcome. Thank you all.
Let's take a 15-minute break.